It's very useful. Okay. Ongoing thanks to Rose Bates. I especially like this photo of Alice Bailey. She has such a strong presence in her inner gaze in this one. So thank you, Rose, for providing these photos that no one had access to until Rose was able to make them available. So big thanks on that. As you know, this webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheading Moria Federation Webinars. And then you click on Webinar Series in Progress as shown here. All of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages and the excuse me, Secret Doctrine series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you would like to view. You can register for any of these webinars on the homepage of moriafederation.com. Okay, last time we discussed the nature of the Sutratma, the life thread that links us to our monad, quote, stringing upon itself the pearls of human existence, and on which are found those focal points of energy we call the permanent atoms. That inspired a friend of mine, Maria Michaelis, to do a painting of this Sutratma with the lives strung on it like pearls. Came out really well. We then continued our discussion of the importance of the fourth etheric subplanes as vehicles of escape, as a means by which to transcend the lower three for both a human being, a planetary logos, and a solar logos, and of the unique opportunity for these transitions available to humanity at this time as a result of the direct alignment with cosmos through the energy of the number 4. This ability to transition is implemented by a number of groups and influences who also carry the bridging energy of the number 4. We then began the second section of chapter 4, entitled Cosmic and Etheric Ethers, where we learned that the etheric body doesn't appear to change from the point of view of our limited time frame, but in fact adapts itself to changes over the eons of our evolutionary process. We ended the session by taking an extended look at one of the most referred to charts in all of DK's writings, and at the updated versions that have come forth since that original publication, largely based on teachings from later in a treatise on cosmic fire. And this takes us up to where we left off. Okay, on the page before the chart, we began a list of quote unquote certain fundamental hypotheses. Let's reread A through C, and then we'll continue immediately without comment on the page after the chart with D. Could I get a reader, please?
And Veronica, are you there?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Cosmic and do you want me to read the A, B, and C?
Oh, always just what's in black.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry. I know it. A, the lowest cosmic plane is the cosmic physical, and it is the only one which the finite mind of man can in any way comprehend. B, this cosmic physical plane exists in matter, differentiated in 7 qualities, groups, grades, or vibration. C, these 7 differentiations are the 7 major planes of our solar system.
So very basic information that most of us learned years ago, but he's doing a review so as to describe the chart that he's just given, or is about to give, actually. It's on the next page. And so we're going to the page after the chart and continue with the next reading. Can we get a reader for D and E? These are basic hypotheses he's giving us. Reader, please.
Catherine, you want to read?
I'll read.
Great. Whoever you are, who are you?
This is Tara. So these
Go ahead.
these major seven planes of our solar system being but the seven subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, we can consequently see the reasons for the emphasis laid by. If HPB, upon the fact that matter and ether are synonymous terms and that this ether is found in some form or other on all planes, and it's but a gradation of cosmic atomic matter, called when undifferentiated molar prakrita or primordial pre-genetic substance, and when differentiated by Fohat or the energized life, the third logos of Brahman, it is termed prakriti or matter. Our solar system is what is called the system of the fourth order. That is, it has its location on the fourth cosmic etheric planes, counting as always from above downwards.
Thank you. Okay, so let's take a look at the two footnotes found in the D section and referenced by the phrase, the emphasis laid by HPV upon the fact that matter and ether are synonymous terms. First, from the first volume of the Sacred Doctrine, page 136. Could we get a reader, please?
How about Catherine again? Cool.
Okay, in 1882, the president of the Theosophical Society, Colonel Alcott, was taken to task for asserting in one of his lectures that electricity is matter. Such, nevertheless, is the teaching of the occult doctrine. Force, energy, may be a better name for it, so long as European science knows so little about its true nature. Yet matter it is, as much as ether is matter, since it is atomic, though several removes from the latter. Secret Doctrine 1.
That's all right. You don't have to read the references. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Next, a more extensive passage on ether, also from the Secret Doctrine. Reader, please.
Heike.
All the ancient nations deified ether as its imponderable aspect and potency. Virgil calls Jupiter, Pater Omnipotens Ether, the great ether. The Hindus have also played it among their deities under the name of Akasha, the synthesis of ether, for what is primordial chaos but ether? It is asked in Isis unveiled, not the modern ether, not such as is recognized now, but such as was known to the ancient philosophers long before the time of Moses, but ether with all its mysterious and occult properties, containing in itself the germs of universal creation. Upper ether, or Akasha, is the celestial virgin and mother of every existing form and being, from whose bosom, as soon as incubated by the divine spirit, are called into existence matter and life, force and action. Ether as the Aditi of the Hindus, Aditi of the Hindus, and it is the Akasha. Electricity, magnetism, heat, light, and chemical action are so little understood even now that fresh facts are constantly widening in the range of our knowledge. Who knows where ends the power of this protean giant, ether, or whence its mysterious origin? Who we mean that denies the spirit that works in it and evolves out of it all visible forms.
Thank you. Okay, next from first volume, Secret Doctrine, page 87. Could we get a reader, please?
Janet.
One of the symbolic figures for the dual creative power in nature, matter and force, on the material plane is Padma, the water lily of India. Lotus is the product of heat, fire, and water, vapor, or ether. Fire standing in every philosophical and religious system as a representation of the spirit of deity. The active, male, generative principle, and ether, or the soul of matter, the light of the fire, for the passive female principle from which everything in the universe emanated. Hence, ether or water is the mother, and fire is the father.
Thank you. Next from last pages of the first volume, ether, matter, energy, the sacred hypostatical trinity, the three principles of the truly unknown God of science, called by scientists physical nature. Next, HPB reveals science's lack of knowledge and seems to be having a good time doing it. Could we get a reader for this longer quote?
Karen. Yes, I'm willing.
What is the material universe composed of? Ether, matter, energy is the answer. We stop to ask, what is ether? And Mr. Lang answers in the name of science. Ether is not actually known to us by any test of which the senses can take cognizance, but is a sort of mathematical substance which we are compelled to assume in order to account for the phenomenon of light and heat. And what is matter? Do you know more about it than you do about the hypothetical agent ether? In perfect strictness, it is true that chemical investigations can tell us nothing directly of the composition of living matter. And it is also in strictness true that we know nothing about the composition of any material body, whatever it is. Lecture on Protoplasm by Mr. Huxley. And energy, surely you can define the third person of the Trinity of your material universe. The energy is that which is only known to us by its effects. Books on physics. Pray explain, for this is rather hazy. In mechanics, there is actual and potential energy, work actually performed, and the capacity for performing it. As to the nature of molecular energy or forces, the various phenomenon which bodies present show that their molecules are under the influence of two contrary forces, one which tends to bring them together, the other to separate them. The first is molecular attraction. The second force is due to viva or moving force. Just so it is the nature of this moving force, this visa, that we want to know. What is it? We do not know. It is the invariable answer. It is an empty shadow of my imagination, explains Mr. Huxley in his physical basics of life.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have a definition of Mula Prakriti, quote, Mula Prakriti, the parabrahmic root, the abstract deific feminine principle, undifferentiated substance, akasha, literally the root of nature, prakriti or matter. In the text above, we learned that when Mula Prakriti is differentiated by Fohat, it becomes Prakriti or matter in all its many variations. Okay, next up, can we get a reader? We're continuing with this list of basic hypotheses.
Peter.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Could you read, please?
Yes. Hence, this fourth cosmic etheric plane forms the meeting ground for the past and the future, and is the present. G. Therefore, also the Buddhic or intuitional plane, the correspondence in the system of this fourth cosmic ether, is the meeting ground or plane of union for that which is man and that which will be Superman, and links the past with that which is to be. H. The following correspondences in time would repay careful meditation. They are based on a realization of the relationship between this fourth cosmic ether, the Buddhic plane, and the fourth physical etheric subplane. The fourth subplane of mind, the correspondence on the mental plane of the physical etheric, is likewise a point of transition from out of a lower into a higher, and is the transferring locality into a higher body.
Thank you. Okay, first up. Hence, this fourth cosmic etheric plane forms the meeting ground for the past and the future, and is the present. So we know that when Buddhi is contacted, the meditator becomes immersed in the quote unquote, the presence, a state we're here told contingent on being in the present, or more simply put, being present in the highest sense of the word. One of the names of the Buddhic plane is the meeting ground, since there are 3 planes above and 3 planes below it. It's also the place where a disciple previously ruled by fire by friction transitions into the realm of solar fire. Could it be this solar fire influence that allows the disciple to experience the eternal now, wherein one is released from the imprisoning quality of linear time? It certainly conditions the nature of the intuition, sometimes called direct knowing. Next, G. Therefore, also the Buddhic or intuitional plane, the correspondence in the system of the fourth cosmic ether, is the meeting ground or plane of union for that which is man and for that which will be Superman, and links the past with that which is to be. Let's take a look at MDR's thoughts on this. Can we get a reader?
Kira.
DK expands the idea of the meeting ground. The Buddhic plane is synthetic and summarizes all that man, the fourth kingdom in nature, has been. Its energies also suggest that which man can become, an intuitive, loving, wise, harmonious being, functioning under the second and fourth rays. Just as the fourth ray links the past with the future in the present, so does the Buddhic plane, which is largely expressive of the higher aspects of the fourth ray.
Thank you. Okay, next, H. The following correspondences in time would repay careful meditation. They are based on a realization of the relationship between this fourth cosmic ether, the Buddhic plane, and the fourth physical etheric subplane. DK has emphasized over the last many pages that one of the main methods for spiritual progress is the linking to the cosmic ethers by means of the systemic ethers through the agency of the midway point of each, the fourth ether. Note too that DK says a consideration of these correspondence repays careful meditation, not just careful attention. This important passage from a few pages back addresses the connection between the physical fourth etheric and the Buddhic plane. Could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten.
When man begins in a small sense to coordinate the Buddhic vehicle or to express it otherwise, when he has developed the power to contact ever so slightly the Buddhic plane, then he begins simultaneously and consciously to achieve the ability to escape from the etheric web on the physical plane. Later, he escapes from its correspondence on the astral plane, and finally from the correspondence on the fourth subplane or the mental plane, this time via the mental unit. This leads eventually to causal functioning, or to the ability to dwell and to be active in the vehicle of the ego, who is the embodiment of the love and wisdom aspect of the monad.
Thank you. By the way, if you have any questions or comments at any point, you should know this by now, you're always welcome to raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, next, the fourth subplane of mind, the correspondence on the mental plane of the physical etheric, is likewise a point of transition from out of a lower into a higher, and is the transferring locality into a higher body. Okay, this fourth subplane of mind is where we find the mental unit, shown here, which forms the foundation of the Antakarana, which in turn links one to the Buddhic plane. Could we get a reader, please?
Marianne.
A man reaches the point of personality attainment in this cycle when he has the capacity to vibrate and move consciously on the fourth subplane. We might term the fourth subplane on the physical, emotional, and mental planes when dominated, aligned, and functioning simultaneously in the same incarnation. The plane of perfected personality in the concrete sense of the word, and from the lower region. That particular incarnation will be one in which the man achieves the fullest expression of his lower self, physically perfect, emotionally vibrant, and mentally colossal. Then succeeding that begins the transference to a higher vibration, the keying up to the higher self, and the tuning of the personality of the major third to the dominant fifth of the ego.
Thank you. This is from Letters on Occult Meditation. Okay, this takes us to a new paragraph. Could we get a reader, please?
Mary.
Fourth subplane of the monadic plane is in a very real sense the place of transition from off the egoic ray, whichever that ray may be, onto the monadic ray. These three major rays are organized on the three higher subplanes of the monadic plane in the same way that the three abstract subplanes of the mental are the group of transference from off the personality ray onto the egoic. The four lesser rays blend with the third ray, major ray, of active intelligence on the mental plane and on the ethnic plane. The four logoi, or planetary spirits, work as one on the atomic plane.
Thank you. Okay, first, the fourth subplane of the monadic plane is, in a very real sense, the place of transition from off the egoic ray, whichever ray that may be, onto the monadic ray. This is one of the few teachings from DK specifically about the subplanes of the monadic plane. Apparently, the transformative potency of fourness continues even at this high level. Shifting from the egoic ray to the monadic ray entails shifting from response to solar fire to that of electric fire. Let's continue. These three major rays are organized on the three higher subplanes of the monadic plane in the same way that the three abstract subplanes of the mental are the group of transference from off the personality ray onto the egoic. So here are the reference subplanes. Rays 1, 2, and 3, the three rays of aspect, are quote unquote organized on the three highest monadic subplanes, just as the three egoic rays of aspect are organized on the three highest mental subplanes. To me, the term organized suggests that a ray finds its place on a particular subplane based on the natural resonance that exists between a ray and that subplane. In this way, like a Dorje and Vajra bell, the rays and subplanes together form the two aspects of a resonant energy field, which in turn becomes the platform or focal point for those ray energies to demonstrate within our solar system. The true meaning of the numbers in relation to these rays and subplanes is a demonstration of a particular resonant quality. They're not random. We're used to numbers as we use them in daily life as just being counters and not recognizing that they are vehicles of very particular resonant qualities, right? And it's this quality that creates an octave-like resonance between the monadic and the egoic groups, with the monadic three informing the egoic three. In both cases, transfer to these ray groups comes via the subplane immediately beneath them, the fourth etheric. From the fourth subplane of the mental, quote, transference from off the personality ray onto the egoic. From the fourth subplane of the monadic, transference from off the egoic ray onto the monadic. Why the fourth subplane? Because, as we've come to learn over the past several pages, the particular resonant quality of fourness allows for this transference, facilitates this ability to transmute the energy from the lower to the higher. One definite result of the monadic rays of aspect organizing on the highest three subplanes on the monadic plane is that in this second solar system, these three subplanes have become the point of origin for the three major monadic types. Can we get a reader, please?
Robert.
It is interesting to realize that it is on the second subplane of the monadic plane the majority of the monads have their habitat. There are a few monads of power or will on the atomic subplane, but their numbers are not many, and they simply form a nucleus in evolutionary preparation for system 3, the power system. The majority of the monads are on the second subplane, and they are the monads of love. On the third subplane can be found quite a number of the monads of activity, but numerically not as many as the monads of love. They are the failures of system 1.
Thank you, Robert. Okay, next up. The 4 lesser rays blend with the 3rd major ray of active intelligence on the mental plane and on the Atmic plane. Conspicuously absent here is any mention of which subplane of the mental and Atmic planes this blending of the rays of attribute with the 3rd ray takes place. The most likely candidate, in my mind, is the 3rd subplane of each, since the 3rd ray naturally finds a resonant frequency on the 3rd subplane, just like it does on the monadic plane. The 4th subplane makes the transition possible, but the final combination of the 5 rays of manas demonstrate on the 3rd subplane. At least that's, to me, the most likely scenario. Let's take a look at MDR's comments on this passage. Can we get a reader, please?
And Veronica.
The first blending on the mental plane represents the acme of personality development. The blending upon the atmic plane represents the acme. Am I reading it right?
That's right, acme. It means height.
Height, yes. Acme. It's a
yeah.
Greek word.
Yeah,
Of
okay.
soul, of soul triad development. The lower mental plane represents the doorway to soul life. The atmic plane represents the doorway to monadic life.
Thank you. I saw a hand go up.
Yeah, Robert.
What do you think it means that the monads on the 3rd subplane are the failures of the 1st system? I find that kind of provocative.
Yeah, well, the first thing you can tell, it is provocative. The first thing you can get from it is if you've got a 3rd ray monad, you began your development at that time, and it insinuates, it doesn't state directly, but insinuates that this group would be the oldest group of monads. Now, it's possible that there were 1st and 2nd monads, but it seems to me, based on what he said about the 1st ray monads in this system, that they would have been placeholders at that time. Now, all the hierarchies that exist beyond the monadic hierarchy, which is the 4th creative hierarchy, the hierarchy of human monads, all those above that are peopled by the successes of that previous solar system. So, the first 4 hierarchies that have now transitioned beyond manifestation, the 5th, which is in at that point of transitioning, and then the top 3 manifest hierarchies are peopled by those who came before, suggesting that if you're a 3rd ray monad, and I think there's 25 billion, I think that's right, 25, 35, and 5, I think are the numbers. Not sure about that, but something like that anyway. That you failed because you failed to ascend beyond the level of manifestation, that you didn't escape the cosmic physical plane, which is a kind of ring past knot that all those in the hierarchies were able to move on from. That's what I get from it. Of course, there's
just occurred to me, there's a line somewhere in Cosmic Fire where he refers to the Jews as the unredeemed residue of the first solar system. And so there's kind of an implication here in terms of that somehow a third ray monad needs to evolve to the love level, which is kind of like Christ coming as the Messiah and being rejected. So it seems like there's some interesting echoes there. I don't know if those things are related.
Yeah, there are some. Yeah. First of all, just in terms of any discussion about the Jews, quote unquote, we've all been Jews. We'll all be Jews again. It's a group that that participates in an ancient thought form, a series of ancient thought forms, right? And they're very oriented towards the third ray. And that's what Robert was speaking of in terms of relating them to this group. You know, you could draw incorrect conclusions from that. You know, like, well, all Jews are failures from the last solar system. No, you know, it's like I said, we all incarnate in and out of all these groups in order to gain experience, right? So,
Well, I'm a Jew. I was born a Jew, so I don't have to worry about what I say.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, but you can understand how it's
absolutely. But it makes me think about, you know, that question of, since I don't have any idea what the ray of my monad is actually, it just kind of gives me some food for thought. So anyway,
yes, indeed. Yeah, one of the things about monadic ray is that it tends to be different than the soul ray. So, you know, all of us, I should say, who are, you know, so convinced that we're second ray souls, well, that basically means that you're either a first or third ray monad. And since there are so very few first ray monads, it's much more likely that you're a third ray monad. So you have to, when you're considering your ray makeup and you decide that you're a second ray soul, that also means you're probably also deciding you're a third ray monad, and unless you have a very strong sense somehow that you're first ray monad. Just, you know, that's just as a by the way kind of thing. Also, your personality tends to be of a different ray in order to create the necessary conflict. So your personality ray tends to be different than the soul ray. It's not 100%, none of these are, but that is the usual. So,
by the law of analogy, I wonder what that says about the second ray solar system.
About second ray solar system?
Yeah, in other words, I guess that solar logoi also have monadic equivalents. Okay, so if a second ray solar system, you know, like you're saying, that if a second ray soul may be a kind of, you know, failure of an earlier period, I wonder if that says that this solar logos is a failure of an earlier period in some, you know, context far beyond our understanding.
Yeah, well, you know, there's an open question for you, because there's no teaching at all given about those kind of cosmic evolutions. But remember, all solar logi have been men, have been part of the human kingdom in some distant past. You know, that is the universal kingdom in nature. All the lesser kingdoms will become human, and all beyond our kingdom have been human. So, you know, there is a relationship there. You know, of course, it's in unimaginable past eons. We're not, you know, it didn't all start just with this first solar system. That's just in our little tiny system. You know, these logi participated in systems way, way beyond earlier than our previous solar system, right? Though when you read the descriptions of these highest, most elevated hierarchies, they get at that level of cosmic logoic in terms of the description of those who are in those hierarchies. So, you could have correspondence there.
Well, he uses the term sometimes imperfect gods, which may relate to this. Anyway, thank you. This topic has definitely brightened my morning. Thank you.
Good. At least there's some goods come out of all this. Okay, next up, the 4 lesser rays blend with the 3rd major ray of active intelligence on the mental plane and on the atmic. Okay, conspicuously. Did I say this? No, I said this, didn't I? I'm sorry. Let me go back up here. I read the wrong thing. The 4 logi, or planetary spirits, work as one on the atmic plane. That's where we are. As before mentioned, these 4 logi are, at least conditionally, 4th ray Mercury, 5th ray Venus, 6th ray Mars, and 7th ray Uranus. All planets that condition humanity's monastic principle. Interestingly, the atmic plane is ruled by the 3rd ray, the blending agent for these 3 logi. We know that 3rd ray Saturn is a synthesizing planet, so it might very much have its hand in this synthesizing aspect of these 4 lesser logi. Well, not lesser in the case of Uranus, but of these monastic logi. We know that it's also interesting to note that 3rd ray Earth stands on the receiving end of these monastic energies. So again, the particular quality of number enters here. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Catherine.
Another synthesis takes place on the synthetic 2nd ray on the 2nd subplane of the Buddhic plane and the monadic plane, while the comparatively few monads of will or power are synthesized on the atomic subplane of the atmic. All 3 groups of monads work in triple form on the mental plane under the Mahachohan, the Manu, and the Bodhisattva or the Christ. On the 2nd or monadic plane, they work as a unit, only demonstrating their dual work on the atmic plane and their essential triplicity on the Buddhic plane.
Okay, first of all, another synthesis takes place on the synthetic 2nd ray on the 2nd subplane of the Buddhic plane and the monadic plane. Okay, the first synthesis is the 4 monastically oriented planetary logi working on the atmic plane. Decay doesn't give us details on this 2nd synthesis, but one possibility is, for those with 2nd ray monads, a bond is forged between the monad and the 2nd aspect of the Buddhic expression of its triadal vehicle. All he says is there's a synthesis of these 2 subplanes. He doesn't tell us what's actually going on here, but we could hypothesize that one quality that takes place, or livingness, you could say, that exists on this 2nd subplane of the Buddhic plane is the 2nd aspect of the intuitional vehicle, right? Next, while the comparatively few monads of will or power are synthesized on the atomic subplane of the atmic. If my above hypothesis is valid, this statement confirms that there is a double and possibly a triple monad triad synthesis, this time between the 1st ray monads on the 1st subplane of the monadic plane with the 1st aspect of the triad. Now, if we logically extend this synthesizing process one more step, could we hypothesize that the third ray monads synthesize with the third subplane of the mental plane? It's an open question, but it would finish the sequence. You can see the first ray from the first and first, the second ray, the second and the second, two subplanes, and then this one, which I'm just hypothesizing based on these first two. Or conversely, perhaps DK's statement, the four logi or planetary spirits work as one on the atmic plane, covers this monastic stage. But he doesn't, articulate the link up with the, with the third ray monads like he does with the first and second. Okay. Next, all three groups of monads work in triple form on the mental plane under the Mahachohan, the Manu, and the Bodhisattva or the Christ. So the three groups are the first, second, and third ray monads. The triple form would seem to be Atma Buddhi Manas, the three aspects of the triad. But in his next statement, DK describes an essential triplicity demonstrating on the Buddhic plane. At any rate, the first ray monads work under the Manu, the second ray monads under the Christ, and third ray monads under the Mahachohan. This is, in the light of, it's an interesting mixture of basic information that many of us have known for years, and new information like these particular levels of synthesis that he's describing, right? All under the heading of basic hypotheses. Yeah, I see a hand. Go ahead, Robert.
This also relates, how he says that the Mahachohan is the oldest of the masters?
Well, it's the it is the office which lasts the longest.
Right.
They're in office the longest. I don't know that he's, as a master, the oldest.
I might be wrong, but I kind of have a dim memory of him saying that. But that would make sense in terms of this thing we were talking about earlier about the third ray monads. That would be a specific group work.
Yeah, and you have to be real careful with this term failures of the previous solar system. I mean, are you going to call the Mahachohan a failure?
No, but he may be one of the successes who's continuing to work with the failures because he understands the issues.
Right, but he's working directly with those third ray monads. I mean, just the idea that a monad on its own plane is in some way a failure, you really have to understand the specific definition of failure in this case, right? And, dump any of the usual,
Right.
emotional attachments to the term. It just means that they didn't break free of the cosmic physical plane as a result of incarnating in the last solar system. That's what it means,
Well, they didn't make the transfer to the love monad. If assuming this goes, continue.
No, no. I don't know about that. I don't know about that. Any kind of ideas of transferring rays at a monadic level is never discussed. So that's not what he's saying. He's saying, you have these three types of monads, third ray monads are the failures of the previous system. He's not saying they failed to transfer to being another kind of monad. I see more hands. Mikhail? Okay, let's see.
Yeah. Where are we at?
Hands up. Anybody?
Heike.
Yes?
Yeah, is Heike there?
Did you put your hand up, Heike?
No, there's no hands up.
No hands up. Okay, I saw a hand.
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I thought
sorry.
you were, yeah.
Somebody stuck their hand up and then put it back down. It's fine. Okay, so let's see where we are here. Why am I totally lost all of a sudden? Okay, I'm caught up. We've been jumping back and forth here, so that's why. So next, all three groups of monads work in triple form in the mental plane under the Mahachohan, the Manu, and the Bodhisattva, or the Christ. Three groups. I read this.
There's a question from Tara.
Okay, Tara, go ahead while I'm figuring out where the heck we are.
Our question is in chat.
Oh.
So it's the third ray is the intelligence for the first ray, right? And the second ray combines with first, third, and form the
There is a
trinity.
resonance between the first and third. There's a kind of yin, yang quality to the three rays. But ultimately, it synthesizes from the bottom up. So that the third eventually synthesizes into the second, and then the second into the first. But you have, while that's happening, you also have a resonance by odd number. The more I read, the more I recognize how important number is as a resonant field of energy. And so you have this resonance between the odd numbers, yeah.
Hi, so this is Tara. So
Hi, Tara.
so we originally started with the father. I think this is off the Secret Doctrine. We originally started with the father, and then he split in half, and he became the mother, and then he was happy. And so I was just under the and then we have the Holy Spirit, which I was reading. I can't remember exactly. I don't know if it was education, the divine plan, service of the plan in education. It might have been, but it was talking about. Oh my God! I just lost my train of thought. I'm being throttled. I'm sorry.
You can come back. After you
Yes,
get.
Let me come back.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. Okay. Well, you bring up an interesting point about how how the three rays come into manifestation, which is really how the three principles come into manifestation, which is that the father aspect, which is completely formless in every way, reflects itself. And in that reflection, you have Mula Prakriti, which is the divine mother. It's the feminine aspect. Those are the two circles, and they intersect. And the geometric symbol for that is the mandorla or Vesca Pisces, and you have that intersecting section, and that's the Christ principle, or the second aspect. So you have the first reflects the third, and then the combination of the two becomes the second, or consciousness aspect, right? Which is basically the third aspect becoming conscious of the first aspect, and that is the second principle, also called Christ consciousness, right? So that's sort of how they come into being, right? And yeah. Okay, so let's take a look at this quote from Rays and Initiations. Can we get a reader, please?
Yep. Okay. Heike.
In connection with the use by the initiate of what we might call pure will, it should be remembered that this pure will works into manifestation through one or other of the three aspects of the spiritual triad. This activity is determined by the major ray upon which the initiate finds himself from the angle of his monadic ray. Every spiritual man is upon one or another of the three major rays, for the minor four rays of attribute are eventually absorbed into the third ray of active intelligence. If the initiate is upon the first ray, and therefore working in the department of the Manu, he will use and express the innate will aspect through the atmic nature, or through the highest aspect of the spiritual triad, to which we give the inadequate name of the divine will. Students are apt to forget that the spiritual triad, related as it is to the monad in much the same way as the threefold personality is related to the soul, expresses the three major aspects of Shambhalic energy, which three are all of them expressions of the will of the planetary Logos and his essential purpose. If the initiate is on the second ray and therefore is working in the department of the Christ, he will use the will through the medium of Buddhi, the second aspect of the spiritual triad. If he is on the third ray and in the department of the Mahachohan, the Lord of Civilization, he will work through the higher mind, the lowest aspect of the spiritual triad. Forget not, however, that none of these aspects can be regarded as higher or lower, for all are equally divine.
So this helps flesh out what we've been talking about here. And these are the three types that we've been describing, these three monadic ray types, and each link to some aspect. The first ray monads link to the highest subplane of the atmic plane, and therefore, which is a vehicle of it's a monadic vehicle in the highest aspect of the triad, and therefore work through the will aspect, right? As we've just read in the material, the second ray monads connect to the second subplane of the intuitional plane, and therefore work, as he describes here, through the medium of love, wisdom. And here he's telling us that the third aspect works with the third ray monads work with the monastic principle, right? So there's some verification of this idea of it being a threefold synthesis with the vehicles, where the monads synthesize with the vehicles. Okay. Like I said, anytime you want to ask a question, it's.
Well, Anne has one from, I think it's a little bit back. It says, Francis, are there reasons given as to why third ray monads failed in the last solar system?
Not that I remember reading. For the most part, there's really very little information on what went on in the last solar system. Certainly no characters of any type. And two, I'm racking my memory, and I don't remember any information as to why that is. Again, I would just say be careful with the term failure, because all it means is there was some expectation, I guess, that you could say the normal progression would have been for those monads of the last solar system to have progressed beyond the cosmic physical plane. That's suggested by the word failure. That's about all you can say about it. Yes, Robert, I see your hand.
I think if somebody's really interested in this and wants to dig further, on Cosmic Fire 587 and 588 talks about what rays function on what planes. And it says that, for example, the second is on 2, 4, and 6, et cetera, et cetera. And it says about 3, and I'll read this quickly, it's a couple of sentences. Ray 3, the dominant ray of the system which is past, its synthetic ray, controls on 2 planes and on one that is little understood. For just as the physical body is not considered a principle, so there is a sphere of activity that is not included in our enumeration. It is past and gone. Some explanation of this lies in the occult words, the 8th sphere.
Oh,
so
we come back to
here we have our old friend again. So I don't think the word failure is at all a poor choice or a mistake.
Okay, it's your old friend. I'll pass it. Yeah, well, that fits. It's the lowest. It's the form aspect, third principle form aspect. So you're going to have that lowest shadow of all manifestation, and that would come under the purview of that. But the great majority of monads would have been in those other 2 spheres that he describes, including third ray monads of this solar system. Okay, I hope you're, it's a bit piecemeal, but I hope you're starting to get some cohesive understanding of how these particular fields of vibration that we call intelligent activity, love, and will express themselves through like resonance on the cosmic physical plane. All right. Okay, next up, on the second of the monadic plane, they work as a unit, only demonstrating their dual work on the atomic plane and their essential triplicity on the Buddhic plane. So, the 3 monadic ray groups, before they differentiate, demonstrate as one united shambhalic force on the monadic plane, before differentiation. On the atomic plane, this unified force demonstrates through its first and highest vehicle, and thus becomes dual. You have the monads on their own plane and the first vehicle, and that creates that duality. Continuing with this hypothesis, monadic demonstration on the Buddhic plane is through the second monadic sheath, thus forming an essential triplicity. Now, in contradistinction to that, you have the triple form through which the monads demonstrate on the mental plane, which is Atma Buddhi Manas. Okay, a little bit confusing, but I think that's the way to read this paragraph. This passage from the last pages of TCF describes how the one can participate in a threefold outer demonstration while still remaining one in consciousness. Can we get a reader, please?
Janet.
That monad can, at a certain very advanced stage in evolution, and one far beyond that of the adept, have its triple simultaneous manifestation and show forth as a master in the 3 worlds, as a Buddhi Sattva on his own plane, and as an emancipated, thank you, Dhyani Buddha Yet these three will be but one, will be the result of a great spiritual vibration, and will perform the triple work, which may, from the standpoint of the three worlds, appear as a work of three separate existences. They are forms of the three monadic vestures worn by the one monad as a man wears his three bodies simultaneously and functions in them separately.
Okay, hopefully that helps a bit understand how the 1 and 3 can still be the one. It seems a good place to introduce another triple demonstration, which DK tells us applies to all sentient beings. Could we get a reader for this?
Aaron.
It would interest men much if they could see and interpret some of the records in the hierarchical records, for in them men and angels, minerals and elements, animals and vegetables, kingdoms and groups, gods and ants are specified in terms of energy formulas, and by a scrutiny of these records, the approximate increase of vibration in any form of any kind can be found out at any time. This might be expressed in terms also of the gunas. It will be found by disciples, when permitted access to the records, that they themselves, along with every other expression of the divine life, are described by a triple formula which conveys to the mind of the initiate the proportions of tamas or inertia, of rajas or activity, and of sattva or rhythm, to be found in any form. This, therefore, through correspondences, imparts knowledge as to past achievement, present opportunity, and the immediate future of any unit or embodied life, manifesting under any of the three aspects.
Okay, so we're not going to, attempt to correlate the systems of tamas, rajas, and sattva with these stages of triple consciousness of a monad, but you can see the relationship here. Sattvic is always the equilibrium, the balanced stage achieved, made up of the tamas and rajasic. Okay, let's take a look at the footnote referenced by the phrase, their essential triplicity on the Buddhic plane. Can we get a reader, please?
Kira.
The monads of the fourth creative hierarchy, the human monads, exist in three main groups. A, the monads of will. B, the monads of love. C, the monads of activity. Mahachohan, the officer in our planetary hierarchy who presides over the activities carried on in the four minor rays and their synthesizing third ray. He has to do with civilization, with the intellectual culture of the races, and with intelligent energy. He is the head of all the adepts. Bodhisattva, the exponent of second ray force, the teacher of the adepts of men and of angels. This office was originally held by the Buddha, but his place was taken after his illumination by the Christ. The work of the Bodhisattva is with the religions of the world and with the spiritual essence in man. The Manu, the one who presides over the evolution of the races. He is the ideal man. He has to work with the forms through which spirit is to manifest. he destroys and builds up again. These three individuals preside over the three departments into which the hierarchy is divided, and therefore represent in their particular sphere the three aspects of divine manifestation.
Okay, again, a mix of information we're all very well aware of, and some new little points that we may not be so aware of. So after listing the three types of monads, the DK gives us a description of the three department heads, beginning with the Mahachohan, which he describes as the officer in our planetary hierarchy who presides over the activities carried on in the four minor rays and their synthesizing third ray. He has to do with civilization, with the intellectual culture of the races, and with intelligent energy. He is the head of all the adepts. The Mahachohan was originally introduced in Initiation Human and Solar. Could we get a reader? Here's a segment of the chart that shows the three offices. This one showing the Mahachohan line. Reader, please.
Kirsten.
Group 3 has as its head the Mahachohan. His rule persists for a longer period than that of his two brothers, and he may hold office for the term of several root races. This is the sum total of the intelligence aspect. The present Mahachohan is not the original one who held the office at the founding of the hierarchy in the Lemurian days. It was then held by one of the Kumaras, or lords of the flame, who came into incarnation, the Sanat Kumara. But he took hold of this position during the second subrace of the Atlantean root race. He had achieved adeptship on the moon chain, and it was through his instrumentality that a large number of the present more advanced human beings came into incarnation in the middle of the Atlantean root race.
Okay, thank you. So interesting. Rakowski, the seventh ray master, who is as of 1925 began to be described as the new Mahachohan. It's in this chart, Master R, Rakowski, right? And before, in the earliest theosophical writings, he was not yet the Mahachohan. So since these Mahachohans rule for several root races, generally this is a momentous shift that took place just in the beginning of the last century, just about 100 years ago. Pretty incredible. And before that, the previous shift was the second subrace of the Atlantean root race, which is, of course, millions and millions of years back. But even that doesn't represent several root races, right? Several root races. Neither of them, of course, we don't know how long Master R will be in office, but certainly the previous one did not hold it for several root races. It could be that there's, based on the failure of that root race, that the accelerated times have led to this change. Hard to know. Okay, next up, the Bodhisattva, the exponent of second ray force, the teacher of the adepts, of men and of angels. This office was originally held by the Buddha, but his place was taken after his illumination by the Christ. The work of the Bodhisattva is with the religions of the world and with the spiritual essence in man. So one of the best overall descriptions of this department comes from Letters on Occult Meditation. Could we get a reader, please?
Before that, Robert
Yeah.
had a question.
Yeah,
Yes,
I just wanted to say that um, tidbit that the Buddha was the Bodhisattva before the Christ was that is
Yeah.
such an amazingly powerful thing and so completely contradictory to all teachings of Buddhism that are exoteric, which emphasize emptiness, impermanence, etc., etc. The idea that he was the head of this, important division of an permanently existing, structure would be, I think a lot of Buddhists would have a stroke over that, but it's a very powerful, interesting fact.
Yeah, well, MDR put forward this idea that the true Buddha overshadowed the incarnate Buddha. What was his name? I just blanked. Gautama. The Gautama Buddha, in the same way that the Christ overshadowed Jesus, and that it was that higher Buddha that was in this position, right? And it makes sense to me. I haven't seen it developed in any other writings, but it does make sense, especially in reference to what you just said.
That's a very interesting idea. I've never heard that either.
Yeah. Well, what he says is such a high being, a sixth initiate wouldn't have needed to go through the stages of development that Gautama went through. He would have already had achieved those stages, much of the teachings. But if you look at them as a recapitulation and an overshadowing, it makes more sense. So you got to hold it just as an open question. It's a possibility, but it does make sense. I saw a hand.
Yeah, Catherine. Oh, sorry.
My understanding in Buddhism of emptiness doesn't necessarily conflict with the idea of any of these roles that the Buddha had. I mean, I see the Buddha overshadowed by the Christ just as Jesus was. And emptiness, in my opinion, is a concept of non-duality, which is one of the places that we're all aspiring to.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Yeah, emptiness is a reference to personality emptiness, and depending on how where you are in your evolution, it suggests that the form aspect is empty because one is focused on the spirit aspect, right? And there's nothing in that contradicts this. But, and Robert's defense, I'll say that Buddhism as a rule does not orient themselves towards higher beings, towards the soul or the concept of a soul, towards a hierarchy of beings in terms of that which is usually practiced, right? That doesn't mean that, like the original secret doctrine doesn't recognize those. I think personally, what was needed at the time that the Buddha came into incarnation was to sweep away a lot of calcified doctrine of the Hindus of that time. And so there was much more of a focus on practice and on the path than on God worship, or stages of becoming. But that doesn't mean that, there wasn't, I think it's mostly a question of emphasis. Anyone else?
Yeah, Tom.
Yes, Tom.
Hi, just a detail. I see a European master below Christ, and I'm interested because I'm from Europe. So is there any more information? Will we have more information? Because this is a quite new concept for me.
There's not a lot of details about this. There are those masters who who make the sacrifice of revealing their names, like Kuthumi and the Master Dwal Kul. And that's even those, you know, for instance, we don't actually know the name of the Christ. You know, you could call him Maitreya, but it's very unlikely that's its true name of this being. But we do know a lot about, there's so much written about him. There's very, very little written about the European master. Just that he's a second ray master, and that he's located in Europe. There's a couple of more details about what he oversees. You can see where he stands in the hierarchy here, that he is very highly placed, and yet, curiously, the next Christ is to be Kuthumi. In the, you know, after the Christ moves on, takes the seventh initiation and moves on one of the seven cosmic paths along with the Buddha, then it's not a European master that assumes this office, but rather Kuthumi. So he's a rather mysterious master. Sorry, I can't give you more information. If we were in a more informal scene here, I would do a word search among DK's material, and that's probably, I bet Robert's already done it. That's probably the best way to find, because there's not going to be many references to European master in all of the writings, so you could pretty quickly hone in.
Okay, you don't have his phone number, so I have to do my own.
Yeah, I do, but it's unlisted. So I can't give it. I gave it out once. He really got on my case, you know, so I just better not. Yes, Robert.
There's a series of books by the esotericist Cyril Scott, who was a famous also avant-garde composer, called The Initiate. And that has a lot about the European masters in those books, and well worth reading.
Okay, there you go. It's not DK, you know, it's going to be about, so you take it with a grain of salt. How many grains of salt depends on the quality of vibration that you get when you read the material, you know. So you just, you know, go by that. It may be perfect and right on, but or not. Maybe you can do a search for European master while I'm continuing here. Robert.
Tara mentioned Paul the Venetian.
As a possible European master, connection with it.
And then wrote
well, he's
Chohan of the third ray of love, Chohan of the third ray of divine love. He is the hierarch of the etheric retreat, the Chateau de Liberté, located on the etheric plane over southern France on the Rhone River.
Well, that's interesting, but see, we're looking at the second line here. That's more likely to be in this line, right? Here's the Venetian master right here, right? So this is another master from that Venetian master. Okay, let's keep going here. And next up, the Manu, the one who presides over the evolution of the races. He is the ideal man. He has to work with the forms through which spirit is to manifest. He destroys and builds up again. So again, from initiation, human and solar. And here's his line on the left of the chart that includes these three great masters. Could we get a reader?
Marianne.
The work of the Manu. The Manu presides over group 1. He is called Valvasvata Manu, and is the Manu of the 5th root race. He is the ideal man or thinker, and sets a time for our Aryan race. Having proceeded over the destinies since its inception, nearly 100,000 years ago. other Manus have come and gone, and his place will be in the relatively near future, taken by someone else. He will then pass on to other work and of a more exalted kind. The Manu, or the prototype of the fourth root race, works in close cooperation with him and his center of influence in China.
So we have two Manus working, one with the fourth root race and one with the fifth, both actively working. The fourth Manu hasn't moved on, but is still has a center of influence in China. I find this interesting. We normally think of the fourth root race as Atlantean, but then you have this other idea of the fourth root race being Oriental. Because DK talks about, the Aryan and the as Western and the fourth root race as Oriental. I haven't rectified those two references to the fourth root race, but there you have it. Okay. Next up, these three individuals preside over the three departments into which the hierarchy is divided, and therefore represent in their particular sphere the three aspects of divine manifestation. Okay, this passage from Dyna 1 gives us a unique perspective on the interblending of these three departments that you see described here. So just before we get going here, so you see the Venetian master here is a third ray master and therefore synthesizes these fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh ray masters listed below, right? And then you have the European master here seemingly on a higher rung of the ladder. Okay, can we get a reader, please?
Miri.
The hierarchy itself is only, the hierarchy itself is only a great ashram with a triangle at the center, composed of the Christ, the Mahashohan, and the Manu. Symbolically speaking, this triangle constitutes one radiant center. For the radiatory activity of each of these great lords is such that they are swept into each other's auras in such a way that there is a complete blending and fusing.
Thank you. Complete blending and fusing. Of course, when you're detailing a chart that describes all the aspects, you can't in any way indicate that complete blending and fusing, except for by all these particular lines of interconnection, which are fascinating to meditate on just in and of themselves, how these particular lines are, how the connections, and there's additional information, in them. And very often you see, again, the affinity of number. For instance, the Christ has this particular direct connection with this fourth ray master, second ray, fourth ray, right? Whereas the Master Hilarion, the fifth ray master, has a direct connection with the Manu, first ray, fifth ray, right? Again, the sixth ray with the Christ, the seventh ray, again with the Manu, 1 to 7th. So there's a lot of information just considering, because it just looks like a web, when you first look like it. But if you look at it, but when you dissect it a bit and concentrate, you'll see some really interesting interconnections. Okay, next up.
Tia has a question.
Yeah, Tia.
Question. It was more looking at the chart. I was going to say that we might get some insight into the European master and what his status is. It's because he's on the same line as Master Jupiter, which we
Yeah.
have a little bit more information about with respect to his age with within the hierarchy of masters and how he functions.
And there is a little more
Yeah.
said about Jupiter, the great region of India.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he has his location in southern India. So just status wise, you can see. Glad you pointed that out because I hadn't considered that. So the European master is certainly overshadows much more than a single country. It suggests that he has possibly the same kind of regency influence over Europe as the master Jupiter does over India. Interesting. Okay. So a reader, please.
Robert.
The fourth etheric plane holds the key to the dominance of matter, and it might be noted that on the fourth physical ether, man begins to coordinate his astral or emotional body and to escape at ever more frequent intervals into that vehicle. Continuity of consciousness is achieved when a man has mastered the four ethers. On the fourth subplane of the mental plane, man begins to control his causal or egoic body and to polarize his consciousness therein until the polarization is complete. He functions then consciously on it when he has mastered the correspondences to the ethers on the mental plane. On the Buddhic plane, the fourth cosmic ether, the heavenly men, or the grouped consciousness of the human and deva monads, begins to function and to escape eventually from the cosmic etheric planes. When these three cosmic ethers are mastered, functioning is perfected, polarization is centered in the monadic vehicles, and the seven heavenly men have achieved their goal.
Thank you, Robert. Okay. First DK statement. The fourth etheric plane holds the key to the dominance of matter. So the transformative bridging qualities of the fourth subplane works in both directions. We've been largely focusing on the upward bridging, escaping from the ring pass knot of the lower systemic physical and of the cosmic physical plane. But the dominance of matter only becomes possible because the three lower subplanes of the systemic physical plane issue form and adhere to it. The etheric body, which is made up of fourth subplane substance. So the controlling plane here is the systemic fourth subplane, and it's from that the lower is able to come into form through adherence to the etheric body. We've been reading about that now for many sessions, right? So that's one reason that it has that the fourth etheric holds the key to the dominance of matter. And then you also, the same is true for the fourth cosmic subplane, from which issues the currently dominant three cosmic physical subplanes, which provides the substance for outer human manifestation. Thus, in this solar system of the fourth order, and on the fourth globe of the fourth round of the fourth chain of this fourth scheme, 4 is both the gateway into manifestation and the means of transcending that manifestation. It's a bridge in both directions. Next, on the fourth physical ether, man begins to coordinate his astral or emotional and to escape at ever more frequent intervals into that vehicle. Continuity of consciousness is achieved when a man has mastered the four ethers. This is due, at least in part, to the fact that the four physical etheric subplanes are negatively polarized to the three lower subplanes, or become negatively polarized. When a disciple begins to become consciously aware on the fourth etheric, the lowest of these negatively polarized fields, he or she begins to both attract the higher and repel the lower. It's interesting that, unlike on the mental plane, awareness on the fourth physical etheric leads directly to astral plane consciousness, rather than, as might be expected, awareness on the three higher etheric subplanes. MDR has an interesting hypothesis on the statement, continuity of consciousness is achieved when a man has mastered the four ethers. Could we get a reader, please?
I'll read. If we wish to speculate on the matter of continuity of consciousness in relation to the four etheric subplanes, we might say that the mastery of the fourth ether facilitates continuity in relation to the astral plane. The third ether facilitates in relation to the mental plane. The second ether facilitates in relation to the level of the soul with some Buddhic impression, and the first ether with respect to the spiritual triad, allowing impression from the Atmic plane. MDR's commentary on TCF.
Thank you. Right, so that's interesting. Okay, one last point on this part of it. This and the following statements should always be considered in the light of a key statement made a few pages back, which I'll reread yet again. Quote, when man begins in a small sense to coordinate the Buddhic vehicle, or to express it otherwise, when he has developed the power to contact ever so slightly the Buddhic plane, then he begins simultaneously and consciously to achieve the ability to escape from the etheric web of the physical plane. Okay, next up. On the fourth subplane of the mental plane, man begins to control his causal or egoic body and to polarize his consciousness therein until the polarization is complete. He functions then consciously on it when he has mastered the correspondences to the ethers on the mental plane. So first we need to remember a statement that DK makes earlier, quote, the fourth subplane of the mental plane is the present goal of endeavor of 1/4 of the human family. So this is the goal of millions of aspirants and disciples. The statement we're considering includes 3 phases. First, man begins to control his causal body. Of this phase, DK tells us later in TCF, that, quote, here can be seen the awakening of the higher consciousness and the first ripple of perception of and vibratory response to the causal body. Second, and to polarize his consciousness therein until polarization is complete. This involves repolarization of the higher and lower physical etheric centers, with the higher centers becoming negatively polarized so as to attract the soul, and the lower centers becoming positively polarized and thus radiatory in service. The third phase is he functions then consciously on it, and when he has mastered the correspondences to the ethers on the mental plane. When this occurs, the disciple becomes aware of a triangle of fire that circulates between the monastic permanent atom, a point at the center of the egoic lotus, and the mental unit. DK says, this triangle of fire, which is formed of pure electrical monastic force, waxes ever brighter until it produces an answering vibration from both the lower and the higher. This triangle is the nucleus of the Antaskarana. Next, on the Buddhic plane, the fourth cosmic ether, the heavenly men, or the grouped consciousness of the human and deva monads, begins to function. The Buddhic plane represents the third or form principle of the heavenly men. Thus, it is where his etheric centers are located. Two of these centers being the human and Deva kingdoms. DK gives us more info on the link between a heavenly man and the human and Deva monads later in TCF. Could we get a reader, please?
Beforehand, Robert has a question, and so does
Okay.
Anne.
Go ahead.
I may have been dumb all these years, but when we say that DK and Kutumi are second ray masters, is that referencing their monads or their souls, but which have long been gone?
I would say monads.
Yeah, that never occurred to me before. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Anne?
Anne asked, could you put into words exactly what it means to escape from the etheric web? This is meaning in meditation, yes.
Yeah, escape is a prejudicial word in normal English, right? And there's some elements of that prejudice that DK intends to hold intact, because from all sources who have made this escape, the Buddhic plane, which is beyond the ring past knot of the three realms of human endeavor, right? Of the monastic, astral, and physical planes, is the plane of liberation, is the plane where deity is first truly contacted, whenever that may be. So, and again, the vehicle for this escape is always connected with this fourness and this idea of fourness, because it allows for transmutation, transition into a higher state of consciousness. Basically, for us at this level, it is when that transition through the fourth systemic etheric, which is where my arrow is pointing now, allows for an escape into a higher awareness onto the astral plane. And then we have a similar form of escape from the fourth subplane of the mental plane, which through, again, that transitional energy of fourness allows for contact with the causal body, right? Or the vehicle of the soul, right? And it's at that point that we become truly informed by Buddhic energy, because the causal body is, as you can see just by all these interconnections, is deeply informed vibrationally with that etheric body. It has a lot to do with reversing polarities, so that one becomes reoriented towards the higher vibration, and thus through fourth plane contact drawn up into it. Hope that helps. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, Tia.
Yes, Tia.
I'm not so sure about the answer to Robert's question, whether if somebody's a Chohan, is that what you're with Robert's question, that if somebody's a Chohan, that's an indication of what their monadic ray is?
No, he just asked what, when you call DK a second or Kuthumi a second ray master, what is that second ray? Is it his monadic ray? Well, I
don't think, because you say someone, I think a master can be a master and function on any ray. It doesn't have to be associated to what his monadic ray is.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, because as I'm thinking about it, I agree with you that if he's a second ray master, it means that he's working, his chosen path is to work under the Christ and in that line, right? And as we know, there in any given group, even if it's a second ray ashram, there are all types of ray types within a given group. So, then the question becomes, well, is that true at the level of a master, or is all of that differentiation left behind, and you move into identification with your true self, so that someone working in the line of the Christ would come from that group of second ray monads. I don't have the answer to that, but you have to look at both sides of an open question on that. Okay, well, all we're going to do is finish out the questions, and that'll be it for today. Did I see Robert's hand?
Yeah, I wouldn't jump so quickly to go the other direction with that answer, because I don't think that DK is somehow a master who's chosen to be on the second ray, but he could have been anything else. I think that there's much more monadic definition and karma, and so I don't have the answer to that, but I don't think that is the answer either.
Okay, but I think saying chosen to be on the second ray is different than saying choosing to do second ray work, or
but you would do that based on your quality, your essential nature.
I think so too.
Anyway,
that's most likely. That's certainly most likely. I mean, it just seems so unlikely that he would be a third ray monad, for instance, doing second ray work. But
then there's the whole thing about Jesus being in the third ray line, where you have fifth, fourth, sixth, seventh masters. That is there a sixth ray monad? Or is he working? Jesus is working on a master level. So it's a complicated question.
It is complicated. What is exactly meant by these ray designations, would be a way of formulating that question, and sometimes it's funny how these questions don't get asked. So it's good you're asking them, guys. Anyone else before we close the book on today? All right.
I wanted to speak back to Robert. I think that this is the whole concept of this whole notion of like the super monad. I mean, and we talk about the three aspects. What is really a monad? I mean, we know, or I guess it's widely accepted that Master Hilarion has a monad, a first ray monad, but he's working on the fifth ray as the Chohan. So, but clearly there must be some line of intersection along those energy lines. I think that, the very question of what is a monad, and that's what we started out with, or at least that's what I came in with, and its aspects and how it functions and its vehicles on those other planes, means that it is a much more complicated question, and it could be comprising a lot of different things. You might have more than one, in the super monad, and then these sub sub aspects. I mean, it's very possible.
Subrays and sub aspects, absolutely. And your example is really good. You have this fifth ray master who has a first ray monad, because you're not going to have a fifth ray monad. Essentially, all the rays of attribute become the rays of aspect, and so there's a given example of one who is working along that resonant line of 1 and 5. Okay, next question.
No, it's just Robert.
Robert.
Just me and my chickens here. Tia, how do we know that Hilarion has a first ray monad? Anybody know?
Anybody could just unmute now.
I could just say that it's just been in discussions that I've had, in groups that I've had, basically, I guess people who have come through theosophy and associated with his work, teachings of the temple, and also Mabel Collins' work that derived out of that in her work with him, that it's just been, as I said, generally accepted that he has a first-rate monad. And I think even Michael
Yeah,
also
Michael
referred to him as having a first-rate monad.
Michael did a lot of work in terms of hypothesizing these higher levels of consciousness in the monad. He does it with all the planets as well, you know, as well as the masters. So I think it's a very likely thing. Anyway,
Well,
we got to stop, guys.
as you like to say, if it's not DK, you know, take it with a grain of sand.
Always, or salt. Say
Yeah,
salt.
or both. Make it.
Okay, guys. Thank you very much for attending. I enjoyed this session, and we'll pick up in a couple of weeks.